Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Masha Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back, everyone. In today's episode, Michelle and I are speaking with product leader and coach Assaph Mehr about two concepts that helped him evaluate situations. So let's dive in. How you doing, Assaph?
Hey, nice to be here. Nice to meet you.
Great to have you on the show. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Assaph. Welcome to the show. And just to tell all of our audiences, or everyone in our audience, you're coming all the way from Australia, Tasmania to be exact, right?
That's correct. That small island of the big island.
And I always thought Tasmania is this, caricature place where you have these devils running around and stuff like that. I didn't know it was a real place until I figured out, yes, it is a real place.
It is a real place, and Tasmanian devils are a real thing. And once you hear them howl at night, you know why they got the name devils. So.
Nice.
Oh, interesting. Maybe I should check it out on. I'm sure there is some YouTube out there showing that I can listen to that.
That's awesome. So we've had guests from Australia. So this is our first guest from Tasmania. So
Tasmania. It's still awesome. Australia. It's still Australia.
It is. I'm going to go with it being a little different. I don't know how New Zealand. I know New Zealand is definitely different than Australia.
Definitely
I know that.
different.
Yeah. So cool.
Right. Amazing. So tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get to product management? What are you doing these days? So well, first of all, let us know who Assaph is.
All right. I've trained as a software engineer back when Java was new and worked as a software engineer and an engineering team lead, but wasn't quite happy with that. So I left to do roles that were more customer facing. And I worked with a company that had a really strong CTO, would probably be a CPO these days. I had like a really strong product vision and understanding of product, and kind of that's where I discovered product and fell in love with it. I got my first role in product about 15 years ago, and I've been doing product management primarily for enterprise software companies for the past 15 years. Really enjoying it, really loving it, kind of find my jam. I've been doing products with AI modules in them for the past 5 or 6 years, so even before it was cool. And then along the way, doing lots of things, talking to lots of people, trying to find out, what product management is all about. So
yeah, amazing. And mentioning AI, I did see your last newsletter or blog post with a picture of the feature man and then the AI, the bot from their buttons. And that was such an amazing way to describe some of those AIs these days.
Yeah. Yes. There is a lot of issues currently in the field of AI, especially around generative AI with copyright violations, which is annoying because you have people on both sides. Like I write fantasy books as a hobby, so I see both sides, both the professional side and the creator side around AI, and there's a lot of misunderstanding on both sides, which is frustrating. Generative AI is a good tool for certain use cases, like an angle grinder. When Sam Altman applied to the British Parliament, or made a petition there a couple of weeks ago saying that the copyright doesn't apply to training AI, and they need to apply to they need to be able to train on copyrighted materials, otherwise they can't make money. Everybody thought, well, if your business model is you build angle grinders and your business model is getting the parts of your neighbor's shed without their permission, probably you don't have a business model, not the right one. But that doesn't mean that angle grinders is a bad tool, right? Then again, if you try to, everybody shoves AI on everything, and if you try to prune your rose bush with an angle grinder, you probably find it's the wrong tool for the job. So there's kind of like, we can build generative AI from ethically sourced data, one that compensates the creators, and it's an opt-in environment, and you actually don't necessarily need very large data sets. You can do smaller things that then fine-tune to particular tasks, because the ability to string a coherent sentence together isn't intelligence. It's a tool for a particular job, right?
Yeah.
So I think we'll see a lot of froth and churn. I think there will be lots of new innovations around assistive technology But when you try to replace people, or when you try to build a business that's just, let's listen to every music on the internet, fuck copyright, and generate exactly the same, that's when you'll fail. So
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Interesting how we always get to that discussion on the podcast, but
Always.
in the last year, usually it goes towards the end of the episode, but today it was just
hey,
upfront.
Works for me.
It's something that's been on my mind a lot. So
yeah. On many people's minds, and I think especially in product management, because we, on one hand, we want to adopt new trends and we want to see how it works and how it works for us, etc. On the other hand, we also know that not everything works and not everything is the right solution for every problem. So, and that's what happens a lot. But maybe this will be a good segue to the topic that we have today, which is, how to help you think about how to think about problems. And what caught our attention was another blog post that you wrote about that, about 2 frameworks or methods that you've been adopting and using together even in product management. I will let you name them because I will not do justice to the names of this. One of them, maybe I can do it like VUCA, I think it's called, VUCA. But the other one is not pronounced in any way than the way that it's written, right?
Yes. So VUCA is an acronym, VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We'll talk about that. The other one is called Cynefin, which is spelled Cynefin, because it's Welsh.
Which I would say is Cynefin, but it's not Cynefin. It's Cynefin.
Sounds like a medicine.
It's Cynefin. Yeah, that's because the Dave Snowden, the person who came up with it, is Welsh. He used the Welsh name, and that's just a different sounds to the letters. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So tell us a bit. First of all, what are these frameworks coming to help a person do?
Okay.
Or a product manager do?
So frameworks in general, a way to think about things, right? It's something to help you make sure that you think about a particular problem across several dimensions, that you don't forget and that you sort of try to fill in there. Sometimes people mistake frameworks for process and think, oh, I'll just put the safe framework in place. And it's like, no, that's just wrong. If you think that you put a framework, you turn the handle and the sausage come out the other side, then no, that's not how it works. That's not the purpose of frameworks. These 2 in particular are, thinking about thinking, or thinking about problems, how to approach problems along multiple dimensions, or make sure that you sort of explore the dimensions.
Okay, amazing. So let's maybe think about a theoretical or maybe real problem that is complex problem that you might go to those frameworks or those. Is the right framework here correct? Should I use the word framework? Okay.
But these 2 are 3 of my favorite ones. The third one being Kano model. It's those things that you don't go to them. You kind of learn about them and keep them in the back of your mind, and you keep thinking, because the idea is you need to think in those terms, right? It's not like I said, it's not a process of I have this type of problem, so I'll apply this type of process to solve it.
Okay.
It's more. It's more of a VUCA. Let's start there, right? Yeah. It's an acronym of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. It's something that you need to always pay attention to sort of understand what's coming. It's not exactly the day-to-day, how do I write a PRD? It's more of these are problems that I will face, and they're to a certain degree in my product strategy, product development, whatever it is. How do I think about it? For example, volatility.
Sorry. So maybe it's like a checklist, or it's a mindset that you have to have all the time to always think about these 4 things.
Correct. Yeah. Mindset is the
mindset. Good. Okay.
Yeah. Let's sort of dive into them. So volatility is how fast situations change, right? What are you expecting to change? Uncertainty is the unpredictability of events. When situation changes, can you predict them or not predict them? Complexity is the interconnectedness of factors. How can you decompose a problem or not? Sometimes it's, the butterfly effect, right? It's the ultimate model. And ambiguity is the clarity on the lack of clarity of events. So can you assign a meaning to an event? So basically you look at a stream of events and when you're in product, that should sound pretty much like, a day in the office. You'll have stuff coming at you from all over the place. You may or may not be able to predict how much of those events, how much of those inputs will come, what type of events would come, the uncertainty around them. You may not be able to decompose them to, okay, this is just about that and that other thing is about that. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, there's some interconnection about them. And when they happen, you may not be sure about what you're doing. Right? What does it actually mean? That is that, yes, this is describe a something that's like, okay, that it's a day in the office for product management, but it's also really hard. So what do you do about it? Okay. Somebody, with a clever tongue came up, okay, the same acronym, but you can counter it with vision, understanding, clarity, and agility, right? Which is good practices in general. Right? You always have to have a clear vision. You have to understand the customer, what they are about. You have to be really clear about where you're going, why you're doing it, and have the agility to respond to changes. But generally speaking,
so this is like the opposite of those problems. So rather than look at it from problem perspective, look at it more from this maybe the tools we'll use or the mindset we'll set up to fight those problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is not a linear process either. So like we think it's a mindset, so we're labeling it a mindset maybe more than a framework. In a framework, it's more linear. Yeah. Okay, you get beginning of the pipeline and the end of the pipeline, where this is more like take the input I'm getting now and apply like VUCA to it.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
For example, when you think about complexity and agility in development, right? When you try to establish cross-functional teams to have everybody from different organizations, and people are people, so by definition are complex because they have their own dimensions, etc. When you are able to openly acknowledge the complexity and ambiguity of the situation, where you say, okay, it's not just about this person does that job and that person does other job. It's the team, and there are interactions, which is fine, and things we're not always sure, so we'll explore the situations. That's how you can use it. Okay, you have in your mind the idea that yes, there will always be those things. You can't completely eliminate them, but on the other hand, they don't always don't always have the same importance or the same composition across other problems. Some problems, you can think, okay, we're going through a rapid pace of change, right? In AI, there's new stuff coming out, being declared every day. Things change. What does this volatility mean, right? How do we counter this particular aspect of volatility versus something like legislative changes? Usually, it's coming, but how will we implement it? How do we have the agility to respond to it? Do we understand it, right? So you can see in the domain that you're operating, what's more important? How do I need to counter that particular thing to minimize the effect to be able to handle those?
So if we're thinking about risk management or reducing risks, and some of us, me included, are quite trying to quantify everything, then basically, how do we put some quantification over there to say it's more important to work right now on this rather than to work on this, or to pay more attention to this rather than this? Is that possible? Do you apply things like that?
You played Angry Birds. You have those 3 stars at the end. How did I do? Just think about it like that, like 1 to 3. But by its very nature, it's not something that you try to quantify specifically and say, oh, this is the most thing. It is the old types of risks, the old type of dimension that you need to think about it. Sometimes some of I play more, so just kind of have a understanding of right now we're dealing more with complex problem, or right now we have a lot of uncertainty in the field. So let's try to reduce that. It's just a recognition of these are type of risks. Some of them may be a little bit more urgent or a little bit more relevant now. don't try to quantify or put it on a scale and then attach too many emotional attachment to the numbers.
Yeah.
I like it. I like in your Substack, it says these dimensions can't be solved, but you can work to reduce their impact. So
exactly.
I as well would try to solve it with numbers, try to like work it down to a 0 or something. But like, so, but to this point, you're just trying to just reduce the overall unknowns, I guess.
Risks.
Yeah. This sort of comes to my take on product strategy, right? Which probably I borrow a lot from Roger Martin, the Play to Win author. I really like his view, but to make it a little bit simplified, strategy of any kind is where do we need to be, where are we, and how are we going to get there? So where do we need to be is the product vision. Where are we is your market analysis and what you have currently, and how do we get there? Sort of broad, we'll do 1, 2, 3, but things change. Things always change. Things constantly change. So you don't operate in a vacuum, right? There's a lot of other things going around in the market. So this kind of dimension, the VUCA, helps you underestimate what's changing, how it's likely to change, and how you will need to respond to them. So the vision stays, right? You know where you want to get to. But you take a step and the world around you changes. You take another step, time passed, the world around you changes, more events come in. So evaluate them and use those to design or inform your strategy about, okay, we know that we have a lot of ambiguity around that particular area. Not just whether customer accept it, but whether it's a fit for purpose under certain legislation globally, whatever it is. Let's try to explore that, reduce that ambiguity, right? You will never solve it, right? You will never be 100% sure that this will always work. But for now, this is the right thing. So the next step that we take in our vision should be solving this or reducing that ambiguity. And later, some uncertain event would come through and say, okay, let's deal with that now. See how that plays out.
Perfect. So now the second one, and let me see if I remember how to pronounce it. Cynefin?
Cynefin, yeah.
Cynefin. Oh, I got it. I was guessing there almost. Tell us a bit more about that. Oh, you know what? Maybe before that, where does VUCA comes from? What's the origin?
VUCA actually comes from the military that likes acronym like SNFU and FUBAR. But it's kind of made its way to boardrooms of a lot of companies. A VUCA world is a concept it's been around for decades, right? It just hadn't seemed to percolate from the business community and boards down to product management.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought it down there, and that's why we're talking about it.
Cool.
So Cynefin, what is that all about?
Cynefin is sort of a more detailed, in a way of describing the world. It looks like a 2x2 matrix, but it's not. There are essentially 5 domains that you deal with. Each of those domains fits a different type, describes a different type of problem, and you deal with those problems in those domains in different ways. Basically, what the major failing is when you take a problem that's fundamentally in a different domain and you try to use methods that aren't fit for that domain, you're kind of doomed to fail. So let's kind of dig in, and it'll become more apparent. The first domain is the simple and obvious, which means you know a lot about the relationship between cause and effect. It's a sort of low ambiguity, low complexity domain, if we use the VUCA terms, where you can tell what should happen. For example, you're trying to build a house, right? That's your standard project management. You need to have sort of a sign off. You need to own the designs, and you need to order the materials, prepare the earth, build the foundations, build the walls, things like that. Those domains usually have best practices. And the way that you approach it is, it's called sense, categorize, respond. So the sense is you analyze, or you try to see what the thing is. You categorize it to a particular type, and you respond according to the best practice. You try to follow that best practice. Above that, there is the complicated domain, which is something where there is a cause and effect, and they are knowable even if you don't know them. You can take big problems and chunk them down or break them into individual components. For example, the engine light in the car turns on, right? There is a problem with the engine. You can break down the individual component and see which part of the engine is actually malfunctioning and fix that part. There are good practices, and a good business analyst can can sort of analyze the problem and build a procedure or practice that in time could become a best practice when it's got more traction, more exposure to the real world. It's just sense, analyze, respond. You try to see what the problem is. You analyze it by breaking it into a component, and you respond. This side of the Cynefin framework is the ordered side. There's a lot of order in the world. There's sort of a reductionist approach where you try to break things down and understand what they are. Unfortunately, this is the side that MBA learns, and they don't learn about the other side, which is the unordered, the complex and chaotic side. So the other domain on the other side is there's the complex domain, right? For example, anything with a large group of people is essentially complex, because there are, n to the power of 2 or whatever the expression is, to type of number of conversation that's going on between a group of people, right? You can't really tell cause and effect. It's more like black boxes. When you have an organization and you want to change, okay, let's do things a bit differently in our development team. It's one thing to come and say, okay, from tomorrow we're all using, say, if here's the process, you've been trained, do that. That doesn't work, right? You have to give people time to adjust. You have to tweak the process. There's levers, you try to influence things to get things to work. You can't really isolate individual problems, okay? The way to act is probe, sense, respond. So you try something and you see what comes back, and then you sort of iterate the response. A lot of product development, new product development is built that way, right?
Yep.
You say, okay, I have an idea for a product. I release something, okay, and I see what comes back. So I probe something. I build an experiment, okay, which is a probe. I sense, I see how the market reacts to it, and I respond to it by, doubling down or going in a different direction, doing a pivot, something like that, right? I cannot exactly always tell why something failed. I can sort of analyze it after the fact, but not before the fact. There's no way that before the fact I can analyze and say, this will fail, this will succeed, right? Unless it's something trivial, like, this is going to be illegal. but that's not a complex domain. That's a more knowable domain. And then there's the absolutely chaotic domain, which is things like you can't even tell the causality, the cause and effect. Like you try one thing today and it works, and you try the same thing tomorrow and it doesn't work. You can't even tell those things. Things are extremely unpredictable. It could be things like when you're in a very early stage startup and you're trying things on customers, just can't even tell who will like it, why they will like it. Or looking at things like, global climate change, which is so complex, so many factors. It's really hard to know what will happen. The way to address them is act, sense, and respond, as opposed to the probe, sense, and respond, where you do like a small experiment. You just act, you just do something, right? And then see what happens and respond and build upon that. So it's a much more unpredictable thing. Those type of domains, the complex and the chaotic, require more holistic systems style thinking rather than the reductionist of the ordered world. I'll just mention the fifth domain, which is where you have utter disorder and confusion, where you don't even know which domain you are or what to do it. And it's kind of similar to the chaotic. You just need to get out of there into one of them. You just try something, do something, find out which kind of domain it is, and then do it. The problem that I see often is, just to bring an extreme example, people trying to address complex domains as if they're complicated or simple, right? SAFe, the framework, is a prime example. You take something that is inherently complex, you're not always sure about the interconnected of everything and the cause and effect, and you're trying to understand that, and you say, no, we will put this really heavy process, best practice, this is how you do it, you operate everything, and it's like, No, that's why a lot of safe problem fails. Now safe has its usage perhaps even in complex things like, when you're trying to build things like a lunar or Mars lander, where you have very big problems and you try to break them down, but there's still a lot of things where you need to do the experiments, find out what's working, to try to break them into smaller complex bits. But for most people like us, people listening, we are talking about software development. Try to think about how you operate and see how that actually fits everything that you do. Not everything, by the way, in the one product, not everything falls into the one domain all at the same time. What I mean by that, let's say you develop a new CRM, right? Developing something and you have like this really new idea of this is how CRM should be built in the future. We'll try to call it out from a completely different direction. So some of it might be, complex or even chaotic because you're not sure if it will work, how it will work, which customers will adopt it, the very early stages. On the other hand, you're fairly certain that people want to make sure that the data is safe and secure, especially customer data. And there are best practices about how to safely store customer data and secure it and all that. So if you're familiar with the Canon model, certain aspects of the product, the table stakes, right? The things that you just need to do, like security, safety, how to manage logins and user management. Those are usually the simple and the obvious. You're trying to work on the delighters, on the really unique and innovative things. These will be complex and chaotic. So you need to approach those two ends of the product, two ends of the problem in different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. I usually look at it more from what is the core that we're trying to create in the world, like the core value we're trying to create in the world. And then what are all the other things that millions of other developers already solved or designers already designs better ways to do them. I usually apply it a bit into buy versus sell decision, buy versus build decisions. Where I would prefer to build the core value that I'm creating in the world versus to build, all of those things that already been developed before, and let the expert in security, you mentioned security specifically, let those experts do that, right? We are using databases systems for many, many, many years because we know that it's complex to build them, and there is no reason for every company that have software to build those, right? So,
exactly right.
So it goes to almost many, many other things that came since then. One of the examples that you gave, and I was thinking about our discussion, the first thing we started with AI, you gave the example of a car or fixing a car. And I was thinking, now that the cars are becoming more autonomous and having all of those models in them, are they going to be as complicated as they are today to fix, or are they going to be complex to fix because of those models?
20 years ago, I bought a car when we moved to Australia, and when we came into to get it serviced after the first year, the technician popped the hood and connected his laptop to run diagnostics. So that was 20 years ago. I am sure it has gotten a lot more complex and complicated.
Exactly. And those 20 years ago, it was a regular computer with if and then and cases and stuff like that. Nothing in data diagnostics, nothing like AI, right? So the question, and we know that autonomous cars are still not fully there. I mean, there are already autonomous cars out there, etc. But there is still more to go. And there is more development done all the time, but by many companies. I'm just trying to think about trying to fix those cars if things will go beyond just driving the car autonomously, but maybe the car will fix itself. I don't know.
Teslas are basically a piece of software now. It's basically like an iPhone. I mean, it's a hardware, but it's over-the-air updates. So if they have to patch something, if they want to do an update, give you new features, they just do it over the air. So
absolutely. And it just introduces new dimension. Okay, so you take something that has been around for 100 years, and a lot of the things have gotten done through, the original cars was hard to understand for people who didn't have it, and they were quite, but they very soon got to really complicated. But then, people figured out that safety belts save lives, airbags save lives, driving limits within, different limits, grading the road for those different limits, where you do it like, in a residential area versus the highway, how to build those things. Those became a lot more obvious, right? This is how you do things. And now you introduce something completely new into this domain and say, okay, look, we have 100 years of history here about safety, etc. You need to play within that space. If you want to break it, yes, you can introduce new things. How do you do it? What's the considerations in there?
Yeah. So do you think that not enough companies are actually thinking upfront about what is it that they're going to do with the specific problem in their hand, and which of those domains they belong to, and therefore some of failures are caused by that initial decision that they didn't put it in the right place?
It is a human trait to look for the silver bullet, the magic hammer, right? And it's the same as we discussed in the past. Like, frameworks are a mindset. If you take a framework and think, oh, this is the silver bullet, I'll just put this framework in place and it'll solve problems. Like, no, it's there to help you think. Right, so this is about thinking about thinking. This type of framework helps you frame how you should think about your problem. So you're thinking about how to even approach, what the tools you might need to approach the problems. I think a lot of the problems come from organizations like they say, okay, this is a silver bullet. AI will solve everything. Whatever, CI/CD will make sure that we have no more bugs. It's like that doesn't work like that, right? You have to understand the domain. You always have to understand what value you deliver to your customers. For that, you actually need to understand their customers. Customers vary. It's a complex domain. What insights can you gather? How can you influence those decisions? And then when you sort of have that, and you say, okay, look, for this area, right, the core value proposition, let's do a lot of experiments. Let's use that complex domain to learn as much as we can. At the same time, for that other area, the legal compliance, security, the basic of how to deploy an app on the App Store, right? We have libraries. We have people who know that. That's kind of commoditized by now. Let's just use the best practice. Let's not invest too much time in that. Like you said, leave it to the database experts.
That's right.
Exactly. So then you put them both together, and it's like you don't have to use just one or the other, because it's really all about mindsets and about starting the work rather than doing the work. So what do you do there with those two together?
These together with the Kano model, it's try to think about what you're doing, why you're doing, what are the risk dimensions to what you're doing, right? And do that ahead of the time, right? I'm building a product. This is the rough categorization of, table stakes versus delighters. This is what I see as the risk in terms of, the world outside with the volatility. Like, how much do I expect change to come in? How am I positioned to understand it? Back in around, middle of 2022, nobody had AI on their roadmap, and AI came up and just exploded. And it's fine. Things like that would happen. The uncertainty will always be there. But right now you can say, look, this is sort of plateauing, and we can see, yes, new things are coming, but they're sort of grouping in categories. So the uncertainty is reducing. What else do we need to deal with? Do we have any ambiguity, etc.? Which domain? What are the type of techniques we need to understand? Once you sort of work in your mind and then classify that kind of problem, you can actually approach a problem. I think it was Washington, the first US president, who said, if I have 4 hours, if I need to chop a tree, I'll spend half the time sharpening the saw. And Einstein said, if I have an hour to think of a problem, to solve a problem, for the first 55 minutes, I'll think about the problem, how, rather than the solution. Right? It's you need to take time to step back and think about things. You can't just say everybody comes to the office at 9, leaves at 5, and this way you type on your keyboard to produce output. No, you have to step back, think, and classify, understand what you're doing in order to then say, okay, this is what I need to do now.
As I think about applying these mindsets and frameworks, you can apply them by yourself, I think, individually as you take information in, but I think it'd be really good as a collaboration effort to bring in stakeholders, engineers to say, okay, let's come into this space and break it down as a team. So that seems like it'd be a really effective way to balance both of them together and have them complement each other. Say, okay, what is the problem, and then let's break it down into VUCA and start to address those and reduce the risk.
I think even deeper than that, it can go into the culture of the organization. So it becomes a cultural thing that before you do anything, this is the first thing that you do to understand where are we exactly, and are we aligning ourselves in the right lane here, or we're trying to I don't know, chop wood with a fork or something like that.
Something like that, This kind of heavy theoretical way works for some people, not everybody, which is great if you find more people like that. There are other ways that you can approach it. I think it was Shreyas Doshi, the zoo analogy for pre-mortems. So you come in before the project starts and you do the pre-mortem, like this project has failed. Let's see what else. There's the elephant in the room, the big problems nobody wants to talk about. There are the tigers. They're lurking out in the grass, and if you stumble on them, they completely ruin you. And there's the snakes. If you don't deal with it now, it'll come back to bite you. So these are all types of risk, and you can say this is the ambiguity, the uncertainty that we have along those things are just a bit more colorful and approachable for people to think about in those terms. So people is a complex solution, so a complex problem. So try to find the way in your company, in your group, that says, okay, this kind of architecture works. Sometimes it's like, okay, let's try to classify these dimensions explicitly. Sometimes it's okay, let's find a nice metaphor to a nice way to work it into the conversation in a way that resonates with people.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm big on spatial awareness. So if you live within a storm, just get used to living within the storm, and you forget what life is outside. If you live in a fishbowl, that's all you know. So as PMs, we could live in a complex situation, a chaotic situation. We can live in these different types of situations. And if you don't have the spatial awareness of, hey, what is actually going on, you don't know how to address it, and you don't know how to get better. So I think that's where these mindsets really can come in and be helpful.
The challenge.
And don't forget that people live in different fishbowls, so they see different parts of the storm. So.
That's right.
But also the challenge for many product managers is that these type of thinking has to come from leadership sometimes, because even if we realize it has to happen and we're trying to get everyone around it and whatever, if leadership are not going to play ball with us, it's going to be very hard to do. You were talking about AI and the trend of AI. I know a product manager that told me that when the trend started, she was told to drop everything she was doing, and she was told to, now we have to implement AI because we need it in our product. And there was no reasoning behind it, like what exactly is it going to do to our product and to our business?
What value?
So sometimes the leaders, it's really in the hands of the leaders to come up with, like, we need to think before we actually do something.
Yes. Think before you speak and think before you act.
Exactly. And also embed it culturally in the organization. So any way you call it, as long as you do something about it.
I find that VUCA is a little bit easier to explain, because you can focus on the dimension that you think is where the most understanding, and you can push the agenda of the vision, understanding, clarity, and agility better than things, rather than the sometimes more useful Cynefin, but a bit harder to explain to people why what they know and have been educated in their MBA about the way to do things is just utterly wrong.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, it's almost like Cynefin is like the first step in the door to say, even for people looking for jobs, to say, how are you, what is your mindset here in this company to solve a problem? And we know that solving, building products, new features in products, whatever it is a complex problem, and technology is very complex, and there is always going to be things that are out of our control. So there is much more that mindset that need to be there. And it might be, maybe it's as a tip to people looking for jobs, maybe it's easy to assess when you looking for a fit in a company, to assess, ask the right question to try to understand where do they see themselves in those domains, right?
Right. Yeah. Do you probe, sense, and respond? Or are you doing more of the chaotic act, sense, and respond?
Probably you will not ask in these ways, but I'm sure there are ways to ask questions.
You could probe around that. Yeah.
I find that product managers tend to reach those things, and that they people who survive in product management long enough tend to be comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, and then there's sort of the need for agility to rapidly respond to shifting landscape. And that's why in the Venn diagrams between product managers and cranky old people, the experienced product managers, and then tend to have a strong overlap. But yeah, you can definitely test an organization by asking, how do you approach things? How do you define your value proposition? But how do you validate it? And how do you respond to did you respond to AI kind of things? And that'll tell you how prepared they are to think about thinking, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very, very interesting. I love this discussion. As I always said, I always learn new things in our podcast. So thank you so much, Assaph, for that. Matt, do you have any other questions for Assaph?
No, this has been extremely helpful, because I really like how they complement each other. Cynefin is the doorway, as you put it, Moshe. Okay, I realize I'm in a complex situation. What am I going to do about it? And so that's where the VUCA can come into it. And so I like how they play together. I really enjoyed your Substack. It was really interesting. So we'll be sure to link it for all of our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. We'll share the link to that article with the show, because I think it will also visualize to people some of the concepts that we talked about. Where can people reach out to you?
LinkedIn. I have a slightly unusual name, not very common in Israel where I grew up, but not common and so easy to find on LinkedIn, or assaph.substack, which is where my blog is.
Okay, perfect. So we will share that as well. And you're also a fiction author, which I also connected that because some of our audience know that I published one book. I think you published 3 or 4?
3, yeah.
3, yeah. Right. I see posters behind you. Are those the?
Yeah, that's the covers. Yeah, so 3 full novels and a novella. Okay. The third full novel just a couple of weeks ago, which is extremely exciting.
Congrats!
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, and are those for those listening to us? We have in the back of Assaph's room those posters, but are these also Legionnaires?
Yes.
Yes, swords.
I have. They are. I have a few more swords that I need to hang up in the study still.
But are they real or are they replicas?
No, they're. Well, I have a couple of real ones, but these are mostly replicas.
Wow! Amazing. Yes, Assaph is writing about ancient Rome, so that's why I'm asking about the Legionnaire sword over there. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This has been great.
It's been a pleasure.
This has been great. I really enjoyed it, Assaph. Thank you so much. Moshe, thank you. Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk to everybody next time. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you to all the listeners. We really appreciate the feedback and support. Please leave us a review to help others find the show on Apple or Spotify or anywhere else you're listening to the show.